Hi everyone, I'm Kat, and today I have for you a Romanian word, a true crime, and makeup. So, the word for today is galben. 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 Well done guys, you just said yellow. Today's case is as shocking as I was shocked when I noticed that there is barely any coverage in the media about this. So disturbing that if you would see it in a horror movie, you wouldn't believe that it was real. When Andrew Gardner died, his girlfriend, Clare Nicholls, told police he had been assaulted by thieves while on his way home. Yet, the details that emerged painted a completely different picture. Andrew had not left home for months. During that time, he was meticulously tortured and gradually starved to death by Claire, along with her ex-lover and her own brother. Claire even pushed her children to participate in the torture as well. What could Andrew have done to deserve such a brutal and prolonged torture? And why did he stay? Let's find out what happened in Clare Nicholls' House of Horrors. Andrew Gardner's was the sort of upbringing enjoyed by a generation of Tynesiders who now have families of their own. If you are not familiar with the term Tynesiders, it comes from Tyneside, which is a built-up area across the banks of the River Tyne in northern England. Residents of the area are commonly referred to as Geordies. The city of Newcastle is at its center. In 1974, Tyneside and the city of Sunderland were joined together into the metropolitan county of Tyne and Wear. Tyne has harbour facilities, large-scale shipbuilding, heavy machine building and electrical engineering. There is also a food industry and other enterprises including fishing. Coal is actually exported from Tyneside. The people of the Tyneside area, called Geordies, have a reputation for their distinctive dialect and accent. Tynesiders may have been given this name, a local diminutive of the name George, because their miners used George Stephenson's safety lamp invented in 1815 and called a Geordie lamp to prevent fire damp explosions rather than the Davy lamp used elsewhere. Another explanation is that during the Jacobite risings of 1715 and 1745, the Tynesiders declared their allegiance to the kings of Great Britain, George I and George II, whereas the rest of the county of Northumberland to the north stood loyal to James Francis Edward Stuart. Born in the mid-1970s, life was far from easy for working families, but like most, Andrew Gardner's parents did their best for their children. It meant that even though times were often hard, the children rarely went without, as their parents, Ken and Jean, chose to neglect themselves rather than their children. Andrew was the eldest of the three brothers. They grew up in Dunstan, nearby Thames and Bensham areas of Gateshead. They all had a very happy upbringing. Andrew's days were filled with mischief, playing around in Saltwell Park or enjoying fishing trips with his dad. He was just like any other boy, full of life and very close to his brothers. Andrew suffered from learning difficulties and went to Joyce Road Special School in Gateshead. But this didn't really hold Andrew back, and on leaving the school, he was able to get a job as a car valeter, even though his dream was becoming a fisherman. In 2008, Andrew was introduced to Clare Nicholls by friends and he began dating her. Jean only met her once, but she seemed like a lovely, nice young lady and both of them looked happy. But only 6 months later, Andrew split from Krista and he started going out with her older sister, Clare Nicholls. He never brought Clare around to his house, so Ken and Jean never met her. Maybe if they had, they could have told him that she was no good for their son. Ken and Jean could only watch their son's behavior change overnight. Eventually, Andrew told his parents that he was going to live with Claire in Jarrow, and soon after that, he broke off all contact with his family. His parents got very concerned and they started looking for him, but they didn't have an address, and Claire took his phone off of him. Andrew's mom, Jean, was getting more and more worried about him because she had no idea what was going on. Andrew had very little contact with his parents until 2006, when he turned up at their home out of the blue. Ken and Jean were shocked to see their once fit and healthy son now a shadow of his former self. He went to their house asking for money, but they didn't really have any to give him. He was very thin, he looked frightened and scared, and he was even crying. He told them that his feet were sore, and when he took his shoes off, they were covered in blisters. But he said that he washed his feet and he fell asleep when he was drying his feet in front of the fire. His father Ken didn't quite believe him, but he didn't really know what to do. So they gave him half of their food and he took the food away with him as he left. Jean told him to stay there in their home and she would go with him to get his clothes from Claire's house. But sadly, Andrew just left, and that would be the last time that Ken and Jean would ever see Andrew alive again. In hindsight, Jean blames herself and she says that she should have tried harder to get Andrew to stay with them, but he said that he had to go. And the guilt is eating at Jean. She keeps thinking that maybe if she would beg Andrew to just stay, the horrific events of today's case wouldn't take place. In the following weeks and months, Jean repeatedly tried to contact her son, but she couldn't find him. As time passed, Jean and Ken assumed that he was still living in Jarrow with Claire and hoped that he would eventually make contact with them. Not long after, he did, but the heartbreaking message he left brought no comfort to Ken and Jean. Andrew called his grandmother, Ken's mother, and asked her to tell Jean and Ken that he won't be able to see them anymore. The grandmother could hear a woman shouting in the background at Andrew. We can only assume that the woman was Claire. Jean was beside herself with worry, but they just didn't know where Andrew was. Clare Nicholls had a very disruptive family life. She had a tough upbringing, she wasn't a child to have it easy, and when she was a teenager, her parents separated. From a very young age, Claire was known to be controlling and having a very violent and quick temper. When she was 15 years old, she left her family home in Portsmouth. Very soon she moved in with a man named Malcolm. She lived with him for a few years, after which they separated. By this point, Claire is 18 years old and she is working in a charity shop. She meets another man called John Peterson. He was formerly a Royal Navy radar operator. When they met, Claire was 18 years old and he was 46 years old. She gets into a committed relationship with him and they have 3 children together. Not only was John an ex-Navy operator, he was also a convicted pedophile. Social services told Claire that she needed to leave John or she would end up losing her children. So Claire moved north. You would think that following the warning from social services, she takes her kids, she moves north to cut all contact with her partner, right? But that's what you think, but not at all. She moved out of the region with the kids and John so they could kind of go under the radar. In a new area, no one would know that John was a pedophile. However, officially she said that she moved there to be closer to her mother, Janet. John's and Claire's relationship wasn't the greatest. In fact, John had called social services quite a few times himself, telling them how violent Claire was and he felt that his children are in danger with her. But of course, that being he's a convicted pedophile, the authorities didn't take him seriously. They do break up in 2003 after John made these reports. Then Claire decides to go into his home with a new partner, 44-year-old Stephen Martin, and steal some valuables because, Yeah, why not? Bring your new partner into your ex's house. Great idea. John Peterson would later testify in court that during their relationship, Clare was constantly abusive towards him. He was a victim of DV throughout their entire relationship. He felt that nothing he did was ever good enough. She was extremely violent to him and their children, and he just didn't feel safe in the relationship. He was so worried about the levels of violence that Clare had that he tried to warn the authorities about her behavior years and years before. He was extremely concerned that she would direct her violence towards the children, but like I said, of course that the authorities didn't take him seriously. One, because he was a convicted pedophile. Then social services believed that he was just doing it to get back at her for the breakdown of their relationship. Then third point, I would also say because of bias. You know, the usual story, social services always siding with the mother. The father is most of the times not being believed. Pair that with him being a convicted pedophile, that's not exactly a really good look, right? John Peterson, however, was convicted again in 2021 for the historic rape and assault of a 5-year-old girl, which is not related to our case. He pleaded guilty to 1 count of rape at Newcastle Crown Court, and he was sentenced to 10 years and 10 months in prison. I think that now would be the best time for me to point out that Clare had a very complex life. Not only was she sadistic and got off on inflicting pain, this wasn't something like what you would think, not BDSM or anything kinky which the other person would consent to, or, you know, a sexual preference, but a sadistic sexual paraphilia. She would get off on repeatedly and intentionally inflicting extreme pain, humiliation, and suffering on a non-consenting person for her own sexual gratification. So Clare moved to the northeast to be close to her mother, Janet. She lived in quite a few houses in Newcastle, Gateshead, Heaven, and Jarrow. She ends up living in a house on St. Paul's Road, Jarrow, in South Tyneside. This is when she meets 44-year-old Stephen Martin and they begin a relationship. Fun fact, Stephen Martin is her mother's Janet ex-boyfriend. Their relationship is a constant on and off relationship. They separate, they get back together, and so on. But this relationship doesn't entirely end. After the breakdown of the relationship, Clare starts a new relationship with Andrew Gardner, who is the ex-boyfriend of her younger sister, Krista. Andrew met Clare whilst signing on at a special needs course on Tyneside, and they began a relationship after he had split from her younger sister, Krista. They moved from property to property until they decided to move in Chiltern. The rented property, Clare's 8th home in 8 years, had been their home since July 2008, just over 6 months before Andrew's death. The property was a terraced house on 14 Arthur Street. On the same street, Clare's 52-year-old mother Janet and her 27-year-old sister had set up house at number 2. Simon Nicholls, Clare's 24-year-old younger brother, moved in with them and her 3 children. Now, remember, Stephen and their on and off relationship. Well, 7 months later, Clare, she gets in touch with Stephen and she moves Stephen in the same house. Stephen Martin had the keys for number 45 directly opposite to number 14, but he never moved in there. So now you have Clare, Andrew, Simon, Stephen, and the children all living in the same house on Arthur Street. The violence and punishments of Andrew stepped up after Martin moved in with them. Trapped in a dark and twisted world of Clare and her house of horrors, Andrew Gardner stood no chance. Poor Andrew was tortured to death after he was sucked into a world of evil where he became a plaything for sadists. No one knew what went on behind the closed doors and net curtains of the terraced house. And quite frankly, nothing could be done to save Andrew once he'd fallen under the deadly spell of Clare Nicholls. To her friends, Clare Nicholls was a loving mom and a caring neighbor. During the 6 months that she spent in her rented property, the 28-year-old kept a spotless home, and she portrayed herself as the perfect parent. But inside the walls of 14 Arthur Street, she carried out a brutal campaign of torture, so violent it sickened even hardened detectives. Neighbors could hear arguing and shouting in the house quite often, but whenever they saw Clare, she seemed lovely and caring, her kids were nice, and she seemed like she took good care of them. They saw Andrew a few times around, but he never spoke. He seemed quiet and nice. Clare Nicholls' family lived just a few doors away from where the violence took place, but while she maintained her pristine public image, her victim became an invisible man. At first, Andrew Gardner was too in love to leave. Then, Clare got pregnant with his baby, so Andrew now had a daughter which he needed to be close to. He knew that the father of Clare's other children never had contact with them, so he didn't want that to happen to him as well. Or maybe Andrew believed that if he stays and he takes the abuse, the violence won't be inflicted on his 1-year-old daughter. But during his final days, his body was ravished by hunger and the scars of physical and mental abuse, and he was too weak to live. By this point, Andrew's parents, Ken and Jean, had no idea that Andrew moved to Chilton. So when on March 14, 2009, Jean and Ken heard on the local news a 35-year-old man had been killed at a house in the Durham village, they thought nothing of it. But the next day, detectives called to deliver the devastating news. It was the biggest shock of Jean's and Ken's life. They couldn't believe it. Although watching it on the news, they had no idea that it was their son. Police and paramedics were called to the house on Arthur Street just after midnight on March 13, 2009, where Andrew was found dead on the living room floor. Clare gave the story that Andrew went to the pub, he came home, and outside he got attacked by thieves and left in a really bad state. He had gotten inside the house, took off his top, and then collapsed and died. Which I don't know how believable of a story this sounds, because, you know, he was too beaten and too badly injured that he just collapsed and he died, but before doing that he managed to take off his top. It doesn't really make sense, does it? Simon Nichols had dialed 999 at 11:27 p.m. He told paramedics that Andrew left the house at around 8:30 p.m. and had come home after 11 p.m. saying that he had been attacked. When paramedics arrived, they found Andrew lying on the living room floor wearing just a pair of shorts. He was not breathing, he had no pulse, and his body was stiff, indicating that he had been dead for a few hours. Clare said that she was upstairs when Andrew returned, whilst Simon and Stephen were both watching TV. When asked, Simon claimed Andrew had been lying on the floor for half an hour. That's when the paramedics became suspicious, because when they got there, he was already in rigor mortis. He was stiff, so he was dead for a few hours already. Clare's, Simon's, and Stephen's story just didn't add up, so the paramedics informed the police. At first, detectives believed that he could have died as a result of being assaulted after a night out at a local pub. Janet Hall, Clare's and Simon's mother, who lived a few doors away, was actually found in their house hiding behind the bathroom door by police. Now, I don't know what Janet was doing there in Clare's house, but she was found hiding behind the bathroom door. I'm not sure why she would be hiding. Was she hiding there because she was scared of what Clare had done, or was she hiding in the bathroom because she was complicit and she knew what happened, and she hid in there thinking that, you know, maybe the police is not going to check the bathroom. I have no idea what Janet was thinking, but either way, that wasn't a very smart move, if I'm honest with you. From the offset, Andrew's parents had suspicions. Ken said that the police told them Andrew was attacked leaving the pub, but Ken didn't believe that. Andrew never drank and he wouldn't have gone to a pub by himself, and he was the sort of person who'd walk away from any kind of trouble. In fact, he would run away. Gradually, the police told Ken and Jean the extent of Andrew's injuries, and when Ken went to identify his body, they told them to be prepared for the worst. Ken could see Andrew's feet and his head. The rest of his body was covered, but he was so thin, and there was a mark across his face as if he had been hit with a plank of wood. Detective Chief Inspector Mick Nail said that the house was spotless and very neat, but a forensic search that took place in the living room where the body was found revealed blood splatters up the wall, on the radiator and on the sofa. There were also blood smears in the bathroom. None of the blood traces were visible to the naked eye, and there had obviously been attempts to clean them up. The detective said that Andrew's body was lying on its back on the carpet. Paramedics immediately decided that the death was suspicious. All three of them had the same story, that Andrew had gone out for a walk around Chilton at 8 p.m. He returned just after 11 p.m. complaining he had been assaulted. The assault did not justify the injuries that Andrew had. The detective added, they said Andrew had taken his top off, sat on the carpet, made a sound, collapsed backwards and died. And that's what they maintained happened to him. It was a long police investigation, but only because he had so many multiple injuries. Basically, he had died from being tortured over a long period of time. 6 medical experts, including burn specialists and A&E trauma consultants, have provided evidence for the prosecution. A post-mortem examination by Home Office pathologist Dr. Nigel Cooper revealed the suffering that Andrew had endured. There was an innumerable number of blows dealt to Andrew Gardner, which included slaps or quite possibly kicks or blows from weapons over a period of at least weeks. The point of an object or objects had been pulled deliberately and repeatedly across the surface of the body. Simon also painted nail varnish on Andrew because he was acting like a girl, and Clare's children were encouraged by them to write swear words in pen on Andrew. Quote, it would have been obvious for some quite considerable time that Andrew Gardner needed medical attention, Paul Sloan, Queen's Counsel, said. The account, as suggested by the defendants when they first called the emergency services, that Andrew Gardner has left the house and gone for a walk, returning claiming to have been assaulted, can be dismissed as utter rubbish. End of quote. TV engineer Graham Stevenson, who was installing satellite TV in Clare's home 2 weeks before Andrew's death, described an argument over smoking. Clare was shouting at Andrew aggressively, saying, quote, you know it's my house. When the engineers leave, you leave. You've had one beating. You want another? Andrew Gardner appeared terrified, saying, I know. Clare Nicholls' 7-year-old son also gave evidence in court. Her son believed what happened was normal, and he also believed that the behavior he described was justified. He believed Andrew Gardner was taken away to jail because he had nearly broken the family. He was unaware that Andrew was actually dead. The boy said that Andrew didn't eat very much and didn't join the family for meals at the dinner table. He would stare at them and ask for food, and they would just shout at him. Andrew would steal food such as bread or chocolate, and he would be told off and beaten if he was caught. They would count and measure food so that if any was missing, they would know Andrew was responsible. Clare would also stop Andrew from falling asleep telling him to walk around for a few minutes. He would also be punched and karate kicked by Clare, and she would also let him hit Andrew. The boy said that he hit Andrew because he was a man. He went on to say that he felt he had to watch because if someone hit him, he would want to know how to get his own back. He said it was not really his mother's fault because Andrew Gardner had been lying and stealing. As Paul Sloan read from interviews Simon Nicholls gave to police, recalling an incident where his sister had drop-kicked Andrew, Clare shouted at her brother, quote, "That's rich coming from you. You are the one that kicked him in the ribs," end of quote. She actually had to be restrained by dock officers and the trial was briefly stopped. So just imagine these guys, they are there, right? Clare, she is accused of murder and she needs to prove that by some kind of a miracle she's innocent, so she kind of needs to show to the jury her exemplary behavior, and this is how she behaves in court. That was a great sight for the jury because they clearly saw Clare's character and also the fact that she can't really help herself and she has some behavior issues there and she just snaps. Simon Nicholls told detectives that his sister had a bad temper and when she lost it, she could seriously hurt you. Many neighbors didn't even know that Andrew lived in the house. If he would cry, derogatory words would be written on him with nail varnish. He had one cut on his arm so deep that it exposed a tendon. Banned from eating, he would be forced to steal from cupboards. But Clare made sure that he couldn't do that. She made sure that could not happen. So his pockets would be torn to stop him from hiding food. Marks caused by a sharp object were found on his body, described by Home Office pathologist Nigel Cooper as a grotesque game of knots and crosses. Boiling water was poured over his feet in the bath. It was Stephen who poured scalding water onto Andrew's feet while he was in the bath. After Simon handed him a boiled kettle, held him against a piping hot radiator, played noughts and crosses with a sharp instrument on Andrew's body, and humiliated him by having sex with Clare as Andrew was forced to witness it. Andrew was also scorched with a cigarette lighter, and when he bled from his extensive injuries, Carol made him sleep on newspapers and bags to stop carpets from getting damaged, and he was not allowed to sit on the sofa. At first, Carol, she pleaded not guilty, however, she then admitted killing him, but guess what? She blamed her brother and her lover for contributing to the catalogue of broken bones, burns, bruises and cuts that Andrew had suffered. She admitted falling on Andrew's ribs with her knees with enough force to fracture them and slapping and punching him. She also accepted humiliating him by having sex with her lover while Andrew was in the room. On the 9th day of the trial at Teesside Crown Court, she went into the witness box to give what she said was a truthful account of what happened in her home. Before she took the stand, her barrister Bertie Woodcock asked for the murder indictment to be put to her for a second time. Clare pleaded not guilty to the charge but admitted Andrew's manslaughter. This move was not accepted by the prosecution and Clare's defense case started with her answering questions from Mr. Woodcock. She told the jury of 7 men and 5 women she delivered the blows that knocked Andrew unconscious and appeared to have killed him on 13th of March 2009. She accepted having a bad temper and being controlling and told the court that she and Andrew had an argument on the day of his death about his laziness. Under cross-examination from her brother's barrister Jamie Hill, she admitted being responsible for the best part of Andrew's injuries but not for all of them. She denied scalding him with boiling water from a kettle, holding him against a piping hot radiator, whipping him with curtain wire or branding him with a heated cigarette lighter. Clare said that her 24-year-old brother also attacked Andrew's ribs when he stuck up for her during arguments they had. She said it was her brother who punched Andrew and held him down so she could attack him but denied implicating him in revenge after learning he blamed her in police interviews. Clare said that she lied during her interviews because she was scared, she was frightened in the beginning to tell the truth. Clare really had no regard for anyone apart from herself. She was prepared to say anything about anyone as long as he helped her. Clare blamed Stephen for burning Andrew with boiling water, the lighter and on the radiator, and for scratching him with keys and hitting him on many occasions. Andrew's father, Ken, didn't see the full extent of his son's injuries, which were revealed when Clare Nicholls, 28 years old, her brother Simon, 24 years old, and Stephen Martin, 44 years old, stood trial for murder at Teesside Crown Court. Andrew died an agonizing death after spending weeks being starved and tortured. Repeated beatings, burnings, scolding, slashing, starving and whippings left Andrew with more than 150 separate injuries on his body, including 21 rib fractures, burns to his feet, neck and back, whip-like marks on his body, severe bruising and brain bleeding. Andrew was forbidden from eating, his pockets were cut with scissors to stop him from hiding food, and he weighed less than 9 stones or 57 kilograms, even though he was 5 foot 9 inches tall. Abusive words were written on his body in nail varnish, and marks showed where a game of noughts and crosses had been carved on him. Boiling water was poured over his feet. He was held against the radiator and scorched with a cigarette lighter, and he was forced to sleep like a dog on newspapers and not allowed on the sofa. Supported by Andrew's brothers, Jonathan, 34 years old at the time, and Ian, 32 years old at the time, Jean sat through every harrowing day of the 3-week trial. Quote, "I sat in court right through the trial and it was horrendous. But as a mother, I felt like I had to be there for him. I just think she's evil. I just can't get my head around it at all. How could someone do that to another person?" Andrew was a lovely, gentle lad. He never wanted any bother. They must have just seen him as an easy target. If she didn't like him and didn't want to be with him, why didn't she just kick him out? End of quote. Evil beyond belief, they each played their own twisted part in the murder of Andrew. Clare, her brother Simon, and her on and off lover Stephen were convicted of Andrew's murder in January 2010. Clare was jailed for life, and she was told she must serve a minimum term of 32 years. Simon was told he will serve at least 25 years for his part in the prolonged and agonizing killing, and Stephen was sentenced separately after undergoing psychiatric tests. Stephen Martin had an IQ of 59, placing him in the bottom 1% of the population. Stephen got a life sentence with a minimum term of 20 years. During their harrowing 3-week trial at Teesside Crown Court, the jury heard how Clare's children, among them 2 girls, aged 10 and 6, and an 8-year-old boy, witnessed her violence and were even encouraged by her to join in, playing a game of noughts and crosses on Andrew's body. The jury was also given an insight into the bizarre sex life of Clare and her partners. Clare had sex with Stephen, who was her mother's former partner, on the living room floor in front of the injured Andrew, acting out the utter humiliation. Detective Chief Inspector Mick Nail, who led the murder investigation, described Andrew's murder as the worst case of violence Durham Constabulary has had to investigate. To say it has been an extreme form of domestic abuse is sadly an understatement. The injuries that Andrew Gardner suffered could well have been inflicted by medieval torturers. DCI Nail admitted he had never seen anything like it in his lengthy police career. Quote, Everyone who saw him was shocked at the extent of the injuries he had suffered. There were welt marks where he had been hit with a knotted wet tea towel. But probably the worst injuries were burns on his legs where a kettle of boiling water had been poured over him. The children were involved in the assaults because they thought it was normal. Towards the end, I think the adults wanted him to leave, but arguably by then he couldn't walk. He was incapable of doing it." End of quote. Andrew's parents, Ken and Jean, will forever wonder whether there was anything they could have done to save their son. Ken said, quote, "It's like a dream we just want to be woken from. It's just going round and round all the time. You try to think of something else and you just can't. This will haunt us for the rest of our lives. We have no chance of ever forgetting it." End of quote. Jean said, quote, "They have turned our family's lives upside down and left us empty shells. I called them evil to their faces in court, but it hurt even more to see their smug reaction." End of quote. She sat through 3 weeks of graphic evidence as the jury at Teesside Crown Court heard how the trio inflicted scores of injuries over weeks on Andrew, who also suffered blood poisoning and possible malnutrition when he died. Jean also said, quote, "To be told that Andrew was dead was horrible, and I knew there was something wrong straight away. He was someone who would simply walk away from trouble. To listen to the details of how he died and the suffering he went through was beyond belief. The thoughts of what went on at the hands and directions of that evil woman has left me with nightmares that will probably never go away." Andrew was a pleasant, caring, loving lad who kept out of trouble and was never violent to anyone. It has hurt being here. It has hurt watching her giving evidence, so much so I had to go out of the courtroom. I knew she was lying. It's unspeakable what she and the others did. You don't do that to another human being. No matter how long they are behind bars, the hurt they caused will never go away. It will be with me and my family forever." End of quote. The Gardners had no idea that Andrew had become a father, and police initially told them that they were unsure whether it was Andrew or Stephen Martin who fathered the child. Jean said, quote, "I was shocked when I found out she's Andrew's, but I'm pleased. It is a relief to know a little bit of Andrew will live on in her, even if we never get to see her." End of quote. Ken and Jean have been told they have a granddaughter to remember Andrew by. DNA tests have confirmed that Andrew Gardner was the father of Clare Nicholls' youngest child, a 2-year-old girl by the time Clare was sentenced. But his heartbroken parents say that the joy at discovering part of Andrew will live on through the girl is tempered with the knowledge that they may never know her because she was to be adopted. Ken said he simply hopes his granddaughter will have the long and happy life her father was denied. He said, quote, "She's young and has the chance to have a happy life. We have seen pictures of her and she's the double of our Andrew." End of quote. By the time Ken and Jean found out, the girl was being adopted. After the sentencing, Jean said that justice has been done. Teesside Crown Court heard how weak-willed Stephen, a man of low intelligence, became embroiled in the spider's web woven by Clare Nicholls after she summoned him to leave his flat in Jarrow, South Tyneside, and come to live with her, her brother Simon, her 4 children, and Mr. Gardner in the terraced house. The judge told Stephen he doubted whether he would have committed any crime of violence if he wasn't for falling under the influence of Clare. Judge Fox told him, quote, "Your weak intellect is matched by your equally weak character." He said his cruelty had contributed to the agony of that poor man's death. These sick, callous acts must have played their part in breaking his spirit, the judge added. Stephen's barrister, Barry Robson, Queen's Counsel, said his client had fallen into a spider's web at the center of which was Clare Nicholls. He said he jumped at the chance to leave his lonely flat in Jarrow and move in with her. Judge Peter Fox said that most people who heard the evidence would describe the killing as sadistic. Clare Nicholls was the leader and had a deeply entrenched personality disorder. She didn't react when the minimum term was read out. The judge said she was a dreadful example to her children, who witnessed her violence and were even encouraged by her to join in. Simon Nichols' part in the killing was lesser, yet was still very serious. Judge Fox added, knowing full well what your sister was doing to this man, you repeatedly were the enforcer, stepping in cruelly when he sought to resist or avoid her attacks. He said Andrew died a slow and excruciatingly painful death. In the weeks prior to his demise, on Friday, March 13, 2009, he was cruelly tortured and subjected to an appalling catalogue of attacks which not only caused him acute pain in so many ways at your hands, but also dreadful humiliation. In your sometimes different but sometimes joint ways, you each contributed not only to the breaking of his body, but also his spirit. In his final days, he must have spent prone or leaning against a wall. He was deprived of all human dignity. End of quote. After the jury delivered their verdict, the judge gave them an exemption of 20 years from having to serve on a jury again because of the horrific details of Andrew's death. But guess what? All of these three disgusting individuals, they decided to even appeal their sentences. At the Court of Appeal, lawyers for all three argued that the minimum terms passed by Judge Peter Fox were manifestly excessive, but judges Lord Justice Elias, Mr. Justice Gross and Mr. Justice Foskett rejected the arguments. Mr. Justice Foskett said, quote, the sentencing judge was ideally placed to make the adjustments between the defendants, and we can see no grounds for interfering with the way in which he approached the different periods to be served by these defendants. End of quote. Neither one of the three will be released after serving their minimum terms unless the parole board considers that the danger they pose to the public has passed. The County Durham village of Chilton is a community haunted by the secret campaign of violence carried out on one of society's most vulnerable men. Danny Turner, a mechanic who lived on a nearby street, said, quote, there's a lot of resentment that she did something like this where we all live. People feel helpless that it was going on under everyone's nose and no one knew anything or could do anything about it. End of quote. An invisible man left without the strength to run away. Andrew Gardner was a quiet but vulnerable man with learning difficulties. The former pupil of Joyce Road Special School in Gateshead was well liked by those who knew him and regarded as friendly and harmless. Why he stayed in the terraced house in Arthur Street will never be known. It's believed that the love he had for his one-year-old daughter prevented him from leaving. The cumulative effect of beatings, burnings, scoldings, slashings, whippings, and being starved, which left him with 120 separate injuries, meant that he was physically unable to flee the house in the final days of his life. He was last seen in public about 3 weeks before his death, picking Claire's 3 children up from school. Claire's children are believed to be with foster parents. And guys, this is the horrific story of Andrew Gardner. This woman is beyond anything that I can understand. All I know is that she was extremely manipulative, very controlling, sadistic, terrifying individual. To think that a person can do something like this to another human being is just mind-blowing. The level of manipulation that she had. She manipulated and controlled Andrew. She convinced her brother and lover to join in, all for their perverse pleasures. But the children, oh my God, it just breaks my heart how she could have involved the children in the horrific attacks. Those kids were very young. They had no idea what they were doing was wrong. It's all they've seen and learned. They believed Andrew deserved it because he was stealing food. For them, this was a completely normal punishment for someone stealing food. Just imagine how scared they must have been to take food without permission. I'm sure that if Claire measured and counted all of the food, the children must have asked for permission to eat for her to know that it was Andrew stealing it. Can you just imagine the long-lasting effects all this torture must have on the children? For them, once they realized what they did is not normal, their whole world was turned upside down. They found out they actually hurt another human being, and this is not a normal behavior. I truly hope that the children got the therapy and support they needed so they can learn to live without feeling guilty. Claire made sure that she manipulated and controlled her own children just as she wanted. She got off on inflicting torture on poor Andrew. She preyed on the weak and vulnerable. She knew how to choose her victim. I really think that she is a psychopath. She had no regards for anyone else apart from herself. She didn't care who she hurt as long as she got her fix. She's just a sick, disgusting, evil person. Even if Andrew could have managed to escape somehow and say something to someone, I don't think that anyone would believe him. And he also had his daughter in her house. I'm sure that if he would have left, he wouldn't be able to see his daughter. And if he would go to the police to say that he was being attacked by his partner, they probably wouldn't even believe him. It would be enough for Claire to say that she was the one who acted in self-defense, and Andrew would even lose the right to see his own daughter. So, you know, I kind of see why he stayed, because like I said, this is a much broader discussion around male victims of DV and how they are not being believed and how they are not being loved. And so I think that Andrew, he probably knew that this would be happening, and that's the reason why he stayed for I think it was for his daughter. I think it was for his daughter, and I truly hope that his daughter has a wonderful life, and she is an accomplished adult, and I hope that she will live without finding out all the horrific details that have happened to Andrew, her dad. Sadly, with Andrew, this ended tragic. Thank you guys so much for watching today's video. Please let me know what do you think in the comment section down below. Please let me know if do you think that Claire is really a psychopath. And please let me know if you've heard of this case before, as when I was researching for the case, I found out that it's not really covered that much as you would expect for a horrific story as this was. So please do let me know in the comment section down below. Again, thank you so much for watching. Take care. Stay safe. I will see you in the next one. And if you are interested in anything I used for my makeup today, all the links will be in the description down below, all the products I used. Again, thanks so much. Take care, stay safe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.